So what we did in camera was to go through the events, and we have indicated the areas that we feel that we need and that the country needs to get a proper update on with regard to this matter, and that there are certain areas that we are going to speak to with great caution. So I would indulge my members to allow me to utilize a little restraint as we move forward, especially with those areas that we have jointly considered that we will not go into in depth. So with that, I will turn it over to the Permanent Secretary to give us an update on where this matter with O'Brien's and the used cars are at this moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Good morning again. So to date, I'm providing an update. When we last came before you, we spoke about only receiving, I think, 30 vehicles. We have to date received a total of 36, so we've got 6 more since the time that we met. Also, we are being guided by Solgen's advice, because I think I reported at the time that we had given Solgen conduct of the case, so we are moving through the advice of the Solgens, and 2 areas of advice were given to us, which we are moving forward on. As per, in accordance with the contract, we are pursuing mediation, and the other area of advice was to report the matter, having not received to date value for our money, report the matter to the fraud squad, which we have done, and a statement was given to the fraud squad, statement made by the Permanent Secretary on April 23rd. We still have to finalize a date for mediation, and before doing so, we intend also to advise Cabinet that this is direction that we're now moving, and to get an approval or okay on the parameters of that process of mediation. To date also, we're able to, in addition to the performance bond that we spoke about, having received the 42 million, I think in January, we've also received from Mayberry 1.8 million, 1.812880. Yes.
Which represents?
Which represents the difference on the advance payment. Right. The amount that they claim was remaining on the advance payment guarantee.
The amount remaining on the advance payment.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, is that the extent of your update?
Yes. I believe those are the 2 main areas that I wanted to convey or communicate: mediation and the report to fraud squad.
May I, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just for a bit of clarity, based upon the last set of discussions that we have had here, there was a performance bond taken out for the contract initially, against the contract. The contractor has failed by the non-delivery of the contracted amount of vehicles. As the PS indicated to date, is 36 of the 200, thereabout, number of vehicles to be provided. So there's a failure to perform under the contract, and the performance bond has been claimed upon. That is understood. Second issue is that the ministry made an unusual, as I understand it, step to make an advance payment of $213 million to the supplier.
Given the advice, let us take the first. I think your second question. I will, given the discussion we have, let us leave the second question till more information.
About the, not about the performance.
Not about the with regard to the advance.
The advance payment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I correct? Yes, we had agreed.
No. Okay. Fine. Though I reluctantly is agreeing to not ask about the performance bond. No. About the advance payment protection. But what I will say in that regard publicly, that has been said publicly in this chamber in the sitting, the former Minister of National Security sought to assure the public, and answered records can substantiate, that in the transaction, the public's fund, taxpayers' money, was protected. The $213 million was protected. And I'm reminding of that public statement, that the public's taxpayers' money in the amount of the advance payment was protected. The former minister said that in this House.
Mr. Chairman, with the greatest of respect, Mr. Chairman, there is nothing before this committee to suggest that that is not the case, Mr. Chairman. There is absolutely nothing before this committee to suggest that that is not the case. And I think if we were to, we've had, Madam Pierce has given her report, and I think even at the direction of the chairman, the members asked a question as it relates to the performance bond. If Madam Pierce could be allowed to answer that question as it relates to the performance bond, Mr. Chairman, and then we can continue without getting into ifs and buts and maybes, etc., Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, there's no ifs and buts about my comment. And I think the member is going ahead of himself. I simply sought to remind the committee of background to where we are. It's not an opinion of mine. It's a matter of fact. The records are there to substantiate it. And I'm just seeking to remind members. So I'm not going anywhere that we have been before. The point I wish to make, which is this, Mr. Chairman, given that undertaking that we were given in this House and in the committee about the advance payment protection arrangement, the PS indicate that there is a mediation exercise being considered. My understanding is that mediation is an option being pursued as an alternative to a legal recourse. I just want to be clear on what is happening. What is it that the mediation exercise will be seeking to address? Not going into the details of what will transpire.
Mr. Chairman,
Is it in respect of the? Is it in respect of the?
We have agreed not to go down that road, and we have agreed. I believe that we should move away from that discussion.
Mr.
Member Jackson, I think that the discussions that we had in camera, we had indicated there were certain areas, certainly that I would allow.
I'm not going into detail. No, I'm not.
So
I respectfully.
I will ask that we deal with the other issues in more.
So I understand.
I would ask that some of these areas, as we had agreed before, we not.
So, just to understand your comment or your request, Chairman, you're saying that I should not ask at this point what the mediation would be seeking to address.
No, I think that in doing that, it may prejudice the mediation, which was a discussion, and they had indicated to us that they were still seeking the terms and conditions of that.
Okay.
From the terms and conditions from cabinet.
A mediation option being considered.
Yes.
But at this point,
if it is part of the contract.
It is part of the contract. So we are following.
So you're applying that provision in the contract.
Absolutely.
Okay. No, Mr. Chairman, that's why I ask, so I can better understand these issues and the public too can have a better understanding. So now that you're clarified that in keeping with the mediation provision in the contract, you are now activating that provision. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Just one final point that I will also seek to get some further advice from this fraud squad in terms of the time to be able to come back. So within 3 or 4 weeks, I would ask, with the intention of reporting to you what was indicated.
The last point that I think we had mentioned, the total amount. Remember, Terrell, you had cleared this up before. The total amount that you have received in terms of cash to date. You had indicated the advance guarantee, you had gotten 1.8.
And the performance bond. Yeah.
And the total amount was?
The total amount of the performance bond is 42.7 million.
So it would be, Mr. Chairman, the 1.8, the 42 million plus, as well as to the bond, and plus the 36 cars to the value of $54.6 million.
That's what we had discussed, right? So the outstanding amount that we are looking at was?
The outstanding amount would be about somewhere between 98, 99. If you include the performance bond that has been paid back. If you don't include the bond, then obviously you would add back that 42. But at this point in time, in terms of full sums that have been recovered, they're looking at the 36 cars at a value of the $54.6 million. And for the breach of contract, the performance bond per those agreements, which the 42 plus million was paid back by the relevant insurance company.
I would only ask the Permanent Secretary and the Ministry officials to check your numbers.
She can clarify. Madam Permanent Secretary, can you just clarify the 54.6 and also the performance bond?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, to get the exact number.
Mr. Chairman, no, please. This argument about the amount in respect of the 1.8 paid and the 36 cars in the value at the value of $54.6 million. Plus the performance bond. My understanding is that the performance bond has nothing to do with the amount of monies that have been paid. A performance bond, as I understand it, and correct me, is a penalty for failing to perform, because the contracting party would have incurred inconveniences, lack of service, not to mention the hundreds of people who have been murdered because there's no police car to go and respond to their calls. It is those suffering and inconvenience that a performance bond address. It's not part of the money which has been paid. In fact, if you were to, performance bond would have to measure in the lives that have been lost and the many calls that the police couldn't respond to because the motor vehicles weren't supplied. So this crap about the performance bond of $42 million being deducted from the outstanding liability should not be entertained for a passing moment.
No, but we can't equate the value of
that's your understanding of the performance bond as well, in terms of it being a breach, a penalty for the breach of contract, where it occurs.
That is correct, sir.
Thank you. She said, yes, that is correct.
Thank you. I'm relieved. And I'm surprised that council would concur with that.
Well, in my own words.
As I said, Mr. Chairman, in answer to the questions that you asked as to how much money the ministry has recouped, Mr. Chairman, I was very specific, and I said if you include the performance bond, it is X figure. If you don't include the performance bond, it is Y figure. So, I mean, that was quite clear. In this case. That was quite clear in answer to the question that you asked, Mr. Chairman. Very, very clear. Mr. Chairman, I believe we could thank the Madam Permanent Secretary for her contribution this morning, Mr. Chairman. Are there any new items?
No. If you have things to do, go and do it. We have some business here. Chairman, I want to understand this thing a little better. And I heard the advice from the Solicitor General's chamber. And given what was said a moment ago about the mediation option being pursued, is the mediation option activated before failure to perform or subsequent to failure to perform? Because I am of the thought that that is an option that you would choose as against a legal channel. But given that you have already deemed the contractor to have failed and gone as far as collecting the penalty for that failure, which is the performance bond, isn't the mediation really irrelevant at this point? I'm just asking.
Chairman,
I'm not a lawyer, but
Chairman, as a
lawyer,
that we had certain discussion in camera, and I think that we should stick to that, sir.
Still stand, Mr. Chair.
Yes. What you're asking is whether the mediation is a part of the contract?
No, even that they were just told a moment ago that the mediation is a provision of the contract.
Yes.
But given we have reached the point where we have failure to perform has already been determined, hence the collection of the performance bond, haven't we gone past mediation as a provision of the contract?
All right, they are guided, Pierce, if memory serves me, you're guided by the Solicitor General, and the Solicitor General, what has her recommendation on this been with regard to mediation?
But
right, so the Solgen has guided forcefully, because I am of the opinion, that according to the contract, this is a multi-stage approach, and we must go through mediation. So it's not really an option. We must go through it. If it doesn't work, then we go to arbitration. So we're following, as we have been, the steps, the course, as we have reported. As a ministry, we are following every possible step, all the steps.
While having taken the other legal action.
Yes, yes.
So just for clarity, that advice from the Solicitor General's chamber would have been against the background of the knowledge that the ministry would have collected on have in fact collected on the performance bond already.
That is correct.
So the mediation would not, the mediation option would not have expired then by way of the contractual provisions. That's what I did.
Say that again, please. I'm not sure. I'm not clear as to what you're asking.
I asked before if the advice by the Solicitor General or the recommendation for the mediation, if that recommendation was given cognizant of the fact that the ministry has already deemed the contract to have failed and have collected on the performance bond?
The Chambers, well, Solgen is, as I said, taken conduct of the case and would have been aware of the case in its entirety, and it is important that we go through the process as outlined in the contract. That is the advice given to us. So we are going through it.
Let me just put that in a sense. Could you, PS, just seek clarification from the Solicitor General's chamber if the fact that the ministry has collected the performance bond on the basis of non-performance, if this mediation option still stands? Just for clarity, because I'm still not, it seems grey to me.
Okay, we will ask.
Yes, valid, I think. All right, members, I think Member Dunn or Member Taylor have some questions. No? Okay.
And I want to refer him to the legal counsel.
All right, no. All right, members, let me thank on your behalf.
I wanted to unrelated matter for the Ministry of National Security. I'm going to ask. In our consideration of the ministry, there was an oversight on my part. The Pedro Plain police station was repaired sometime last year. Pedro Plain.
No, remember, they came with specific information. I'm not asking
for the answer, no. I'm just making a friendly request.
I would ask you just to route it through the clerk.
Okay. I'll be guided by your advice, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that consideration.
I will not.
Members, on your behalf, let me thank the representatives from the Ministry of National Security. Thank you for coming. You're being very forthright with us. As I said, we have done everything possible to ensure that we don't prejudice any upcoming problems that may occur. But that, as you know, in the nation's interest, we're all very concerned that this project that was supposed to give us the 200 vehicles, we're still stuck at, what, 36 vehicles, and it really has created complications for the ministry and the police force. So we know you're trying your best to recover, and as you said, you will speak to the police and give us an idea on how that.
Well, you must emphasize it after 17 months, Mr. Chairman, that the contract was signed from January 2017.
Absolutely. So thank you to you and your team, PS.
Thank you very much, sir. And you can imagine I'm equally frustrated too, because I would like to see the terms of the contract met, and
Our sympathies are with you, PS.
Thank you very much.
I suspect that you have been put in a very awkward position. And as a civil servant, it is not too healthy. That should never happen to our public servants.
Thank you, PS.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I would just want to wish the PS and her team a successful mediation. I know they have been, I know they have been trying and doing their best, and in the nation's interest. I want to wish them a successful mediation, and hopefully when they return, they will have news that it was successful.
The public service need mediation all around because of the stress that they have been put on.
Thank you, PS. We now ask for the Ministry of National.
Including those at Petrojam too.
All right. FS, let me welcome you. I'll give you an opportunity to introduce your team. You can introduce the whole team, actually, because you have some sitting members here. But, but let me apologize. I know we kept you waiting a little bit, but we had to go in camera. It's taken us a little while. But we try. I don't think we should be too long. But I give you a chance to just introduce the team.
Good morning.
Yes.
I have
make sure stock is in properly. Oh, all right. Go ahead. It's working. Yeah.
Okay. This morning I have Mrs. Lorna Phillips, who is acting Deputy Financial Secretary for the Strategic Management Division at the moment, and Mrs. Janice Stewart, also from Shermley. Ms. Cardine Morrison is also here.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
All right. FS, let me just start.
Chairman, just to say that that's a very good part of the Ministry of Finance. Just making an observation.
No, absolutely. FS, let me just start by saying I'm very disappointed about something. We had written to you a few weeks ago seeking clarity on the number on the advisors and consultants, or advisors/consultants in all the ministries. And you had sent a report to us. The report, which members have in front of them now, indicates that there are approximately 40 of those consultant advisors. I took the opportunity to look through the list, and it occurred to me that there were persons that I see writing in the paper, very visible persons who indicate that they are advisors to ministers who were not in the list. On Monday, I asked the clerk to write to you to speak specifically to 2 of those consultants who were not on the list provided to us. One of them was Mr. Delano Seavright, who is employed, who is indicated as an advisor to the minister, special advisor to the minister, and has that terminology. And secondly, Garfield Higgins, who writes in the paper and indicates that he is a consultant advisor to the Minister of Education.
A mouthpiece.
Those 2 names did not appear on the list. I wrote to you on Monday, and yesterday we got back a response from you that says, "Dear Ms. Bailey, further to yesterday's correspondence, please be advised that Mr. Delano Seavright is employed by the Tourism Enhancement Fund as Senior Communication Strategist and is in receipt of a traveling allowance." And then afterwards we got a second one which says, "Dear Mrs. Bailey, reference is made to your email below. Checks by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service have revealed the following. Mr. Garfield Higgins is engaged to the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information as a senior advisor/consultant. He is in receipt of traveling allowance." The ministry has not been able to identify any. All right. So those were the things. Now, this gives me great concern, and I'll tell you why. One, if we as a committee write to you as the Ministry of Finance, and you indicate that these are the persons, and the list comes back incomplete, it means either that these persons are off the list. Well, we need to figure out why it is. And and that they're not on your list that comes to us as primary? And secondly, what others may be caught in this net, that there are other advisor consultants that we may not have unless we specifically ask for them. And I must say that we need some clarity as to why it was that we did not have those persons on it. And secondly, why it is that if you have consultant advisors, they're being put in other jobs in other positions rather than just straight consultant advisor, as is the norm. Is it that they're putting these positions for, well, for whatever reason? I will not impugn anything. But I think that as a committee, we need clarity on this and to indicate that certainly I am not pleased with that.
Okay, sir. The Ministry of Finance has some procedures in place which require that where a ministry wishes to engage consultants or advisors, they should in fact send information to the Ministry of Finance. We recognize that this has not obtained on all occasions. So in putting the list together, we did ask ministries to provide us with their list. The list that came back, in addition to what we would already have had at the Ministry of Finance, did not have those persons who you asked about after on there. And so what you got was missing it.
I want to just follow up on that.
Well, I don't, are you hold on, yeah. I'd allow her to finish. Your, where you, yeah.
Okay, so you asked about 3 persons, and we did some checks. We actually, the second email that you read was actually the first that was sent, and the second one came in relating to Mr. Seabright. With respect to Mr. Seabright, we are aware that there are publications indicating him as an advisor to the minister, and that was one of the reasons why the response was delayed. We were trying to confirm exactly what his engagement was. I was advised by the Ministry of Tourism that he's engaged to TEF as a communications specialist, not as advisor to the minister. He provides services to TEF and the wider ministry because TEF has now been de-earmarked and is actually funded through the ministry.
So I would ask a question. You're saying is he a member of the civil service structure?
Okay, I'm advised that what he has is an employment contract with Tourism Enhancement Fund. So he would not be civil service, but he would be with an entity of the government.
Would that have needed your permission to proceed?
Yes.
And did you go through the procurement of these services? Are you certain that it was done in the proper manner?
It's an employment contract, so you do go through procurement.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if an employment contract of that nature would need to go through procurement per se.
No.
I'm not of that opinion.
No, it didn't require procurement.
So you can
I'm sorry,
hire,
can I have the answer from the PS?
I'm not, I won't dispute it. So you're saying, FS, that if any agency wants to hire anybody, they can do so without procurement once they go through this route? Is that how the system is now set up? No, but that is the obvious determination coming out of this.
Okay. Employment contracts would relate to a position that's not on the establishment, right? Right.
So this position is not on the establishment?
Right, it would not be on the establishment. And
Yeah.
Yes, I'd wanted to inquire because I realized that in the other place, in the Senate, questions were answered in relation to this same issue. And I'm just comparing the responses that came from that place and what we have received. And for example, I'm seeing great variance. For example, in the Ministry of National Security, we have 5 being listed in the document that we have received, whilst in the Senate, they were told 6. And even there, they were saying that it should have been 7. So, Chairman, I really believe that this is really quite
Untidy.
all right, the Ministry of Finance got several requests. The requests were not all exactly the same, to the best of my knowledge. Some asked for consultants and advisors. I think some also referenced just straight contract officers. So I believe what went to the Senate had some additional information with respect to just other contract officers who are not consultants or advisors. Would have had an additional table with just the numbers.
Just to be clear, what I'm seeing from the Senate is a list of employed consultants, stroke advisors, and other contract officers. But it is clearly what we want.
Right. What we submitted here was just consultants and advisors.
But Chair, can I just on what Member Paul looking at both lists, and let's use the Ministry of Finance, where your list to us here from the Ministry of Finance gives us 3 individuals as technical advisors and advisor, but the one that came to the Senate had 4 names. One name difference between what you sent to us at the PAC compared to what was sent to the Senate. And I'm using your ministry now. And that person on the Senate list was listed as an advisor. Michael.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So Michael Tharker was left off this list because he's engaged by the CDB.
But he's listed as a senior advisor.
Yeah, he's an advisor, but engaged by the CDB.
And not by the government of Jamaica.
And not by the government.
And not by the government of Jamaica.
Yeah.
Well, I have an additional question to that, but I'll allow.
That individual said not being engaged by the government of Jamaica. Is there any remuneration provided by the government of Jamaica in respect to his engagement by the
right,
CDB?
so there are some benefits, but his actual remuneration is from the CDB.
Benefits in monetary terms?
No, I believe we have provided housing.
Housing?
Yes.
Car?
Yes, a vehicle. I would need to check the specifics, yes.
Any duty waiver?
Again, I would need to check on that. I don't think so, but I would need to check.
And this individual is within the ministry, the minister's office. He's employed to the ministry or the minister's office itself.
He provides advice to the minister, but he's engaged to the ministry, not to the engaged, but
and reason being, in the list that came to the Senate, it says salary paid by CDB, GOJ pays on a housing allowance, and it is quoted here in US dollars. And I was going back on a document that was provided by the ministry on the list of waivers, and his name basically comes up nearly every month on waiver. Approval was granted based on Cabinet Decision number 2816, and this is for income tax. So, you know, on what basis would he get a waiver for?
Okay, I believe it would be related to the fact that it is a CDB that is paying him. The multilateral institutions have waivers associated with, or well, exemption of certain taxation items associated. So it would be in relation to the fact that he is associated with the CDB.
And all persons employed by multilaterals are waived here in Jamaica?
The multilaterals, yes, would be subject to waiver. The agreements that Jamaica makes with the multilaterals has the exemption in respect of taxes. Okay, so I'm not saying that a project here that is engaging persons would waive income tax. There are some differences, but for instance,
and that's why I asked, because you know, I'm not saying that there are some of the taxes that should not be waived, because the amount that is given here, income tax and education tax relief, is at $870,000 for each waiver, which is quite a substantial amount. You know, where income tax is concerned, you know, I would imagine that something would have been paid, but the other taxes, there could be a waiver. It's quite a substantial amount.
Okay, I can do some specific checks in relation to that one and advise the committee.
Sure.
Just two further questions. Firstly, you have listed salaries and traveling allowances, but you haven't said anything about gratuities. Is that applicable, and what is the rate?
Gratuities?
Right, at the end of the contract, don't you pay a gratuity?
Which?
In relation to all of these
Which
officers.
document are you looking at? Because
I'm looking at the one that we have gotten, the salary level per annum, traveling, so I'm inquiring about gratuities. Because sometimes we don't think about gratuity, but that's an integral part of the payment.
Okay, so the contract would speak to whether or not gratuity would be due, dependent on the performance.
This list that you gave us, and it jumped out at me, because the only one that shows any gratuity and a per annum is the Ministry of Transport and Mining, where the others don't show it as a line item. But the Ministry of, what is the difference then between these contracts compared to
so it is possible that the Ministry of Transport and Mining may have actually made payments in terms of gratuity already, while the others haven't. The gratuity would generally come after a 2-year period has been satisfactorily completed.
Right, so it's really, it is usually automatic, and all I'm saying is that it should be stated as we look at the figures for salary and traveling. Pierce, I'm also seeing Mr. Orbin Hill as a consultant to the Ministry of Finance. I gather that he has gone to another place.
Yes. So again, we had a number of requests. I think the request had spoken to since 2016, and therefore he would have been indicated even though he is currently no longer with the Ministry of Finance.
transition from Ministry of Finance to the Growth Council?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And that remuneration would not be... No, it's on this. Oh, it's not on the Growth Council.
Chairman, education.
Yeah.
Yes, Chairman, through you to the Financial Secretary. Education, it is only showing Hay Webster as one of the consultants there, but I'm certain that, as a Chairman had said earlier on, we have Higgins, we have another one, Robert Morgan, as consultant who worked with the Ministry of Education. Could you give an explanation why they're not listed? Miller.
Okay, so again, the ministry did not have documentation, did not get documentation on these persons on our initial request. We did check following the request on Monday, and yes, we have sent back to him to confirm that Mr. Higgins is with the Ministry of Education. The third person actually had said Roy Miller. Right, we were not able to identify Roy Miller. I think you just referenced to Robert. Yes, I think there's a Robert Miller. With our checks yesterday, I think we came up with a Robert Miller, but with agriculture.
Also a Singh.
With where?
Agriculture, as of last week.
Brittany Singh, do you know that name at education?
Repeat?
Brittany Singh.
Brittany Singh. No, I don't. We would again have to check.
But Chair, how many more of these, what I would call ghost consultants, exist within the system? Because if it is that before employment, it has to be approved by the Ministry of Finance. Mm-hmm. There are discrepancies between what came to us at the committee and what went to the Senate. And it is obvious that there are some out there, as you have found out when the chairman sent you. Is the ministry now looking at going through it with a fine-tooth comb in how many more of those ghost consultants are out there?
All right, so the ministry is in the process of trying to ensure we have an accurate database of not just advisors and consultants, but the overall employees of the government. And this certainly would be an aspect that we now focus on in terms of ensuring that we have the full database and that the procedures that are in place for engagement are followed.
And why Chairman is because I think it is stink with hypocrisy that the government would ask persons to go for early retirement because of this rationalization of the civil service and at the same time of the public service, and at the same time, as I describe them as ghost consultants that are not and are being paid by be it by an agency or ministry, but it is happening, and it is obvious that what the ministry thought that was on their database is actually not. So how many more of those are out there? You know, it's untidy.
Just before this answer, I want to conjoin our question to Member Phillips. These entities include government companies. They are similarly obliged to get approval for the consultants, like places like Petrojam. In much the same way that the TEF would be so required, or JUTC. And before you answer, Pierce, those persons so engaged, is there any penalty to any of the officers in these entities who would have engaged them without the requisite approval by the Ministry of Finance.
Okay, so the entities, to the extent that they are engaging persons on their established posts, would not need the approval of the ministry.
Who gives the approval? The board?
Right.
The board for those?
It would be their boards. If, however, you are engaging outside of the established positions, then you are required to submit to the Ministry of Finance.
So if we are interested in those engaged by those government companies, we call them indirectly?
Yes, sir, you could do that.
Chairman, I am serving notice that in light of the clarity given by the FS, will seek to inquire into the consultants and advisors engaged by a number of government entities like Petrojam, TEF, JUTC, Universal Service Fund, because
remember, I think what this is a general concern, yes, and I'm picking up, and I've made some points on it, but I think it's something that, as a committee, we're going to have to ask the ministry to formally, we're going to ask them to look at these issues. And I will just add to you, there are some things. The reason why the consultant issue is of such moment is that these consultants are brought on for different reasons, but fundamentally A, for technical advice that only they can give, or B, in some cases they're advisors to ministers, which is almost a political appointment, which allows for them to have that information during that period of time, and they're assigned to these ministers. Now, the difficulty you have with it is A, there's a band within which they're paid. Now, if what we're seeing is that people are consultant advisors, but because there's a need to pay them more, they're being hired through the agencies, that does an injustice to all the systems that have been put in place by the Parliament.
I go further, to circumvent the system, Mr. Chairman.
And therefore, we need to be very clear, and as a committee, we're going to instruct you. We need to get a proper, clean list of these consultant advisors that are not just those that are specifically to the ministers, but across the sector, so that we can be clear what is there. The second thing is you have a band within which they're paid. We need to clear up and ensure that it is within this band, and those that are outside of it, what is the justification for it? Because what we're seeing is consultant advisors who are political advisors to ministers are now taking up positions in other organizations. We need to be clear how that is done. And I dare say one of the things that we would ask you to look at also is we hope that you have a system that ensures that persons get a salary and may not be working in different arms of government, that you have some mechanism to ensure that that does not happen. Not saying that it is, but we want to be clear that that is not the case. So I would suggest that there's some regularizing that needs to be done, and that we have got to be clear what are the terms and reference and how we engage these consultants / advisors to the public sector.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and just to, I think we need to get the clarification before we speak to the issue of circumventing. Get to the clarification first. Yes.
Absolutely.
And I think we, in addition to the clarification, I'm not sure which member I'm sorry, I was looking at the list, but I heard someone mention hypocrisy. But again, I mean, if we're going to speak of hypocrisy, then certainly that would have to be taken within the context of some sort of comparative analysis. Now, I don't know who, if you said it, you said it. The point I'm making is that I heard that word, and if anybody is going to speak of hypocrisy, then there must be some sort of comparative analysis. Because what I'm seeing here is 16 ministries, what I'm seeing here until the clarification comes, but certainly what I'm seeing here is 16 ministries totaling 40 advisors, consultants. And I do recall in another administration when 8 of 16 ministries totaled 40 consultants with a budget to the public purse of over $100 million. So I'm just merely indicating that before we go down that road, let's get all the facts together and then we can do a comparative analysis before we start saying things like hypocrisy and also words like circumventing without the full information before us.
And member Terry Long? No, please, member Terry Long, I understand what you have said. I just want us to be clear of something. Today, just looking at it, I have always believed that our committee, in working together, we are trying to seek to make better government, more efficient government. So what we are, let me just finish. And in doing so, members, in doing so, what we want to do is set certain parameters where we see breaches that will govern not a party or a party in government, but will make for a better government. So while I sit in this chair, anything that I do is with the vision of us trying to make a better government for all. However, please, let me just say why I am seized by the need to say what I have said today is the fact that we as a committee indicated to the Ministry of Finance that we wanted some information. In looking at the information that we received, it missed out, it had glaring omissions. And we have asked for clarification and received clarification. Now, having done that, what it means, there's no doubt that we have got to strengthen the rules and regulations that govern it. We need to see how it is that some of these agencies may be employing persons for other reasons other than what the need is for government, and ensure that these things are in place and make our recommendations to Parliament. So it is not with any, and I want us to be careful that we immediately begin to try and throw barbs back and forth without looking at the reality that obviously just sitting here today, there have been some problems, and that our job as the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee is to look at efficiency of government and determine how we are going to ensure that future committees do not have the problem that we had today.
Yes, and I'm in agreement, Mr. Chairman, and as you mentioned the words better government, better governance, accountability structures, etc., Mr. Chairman, I'm not in disagreement with you. And clearly, from the documents before us, as it relates to the present government's drive towards accountability and saving the public purse, you have 16 ministries with 40 consultants, as opposed to a situation that prevailed before when 8 of 16 had 40. So I'm just indicating that, yes, you're correct, and so far, the document that we have, subject to clarification, etc., the document that we have before us suggests clearly that the government is moving in the right direction for good governance and better governance, and limiting the number of consultants and advisors, certainly across the 16 ministries from this document.
As chair, as a member who was a practicing lawyer, he's now practicing arts and sports. You know, I am surprised that he would again, after your intervention, and I'm taken aback, chair, that he would continue to seek to bring politics within the committee, Chairman. And I would ask him to refrain from it, as the Chairman quite have said it in no uncertain terms. Let us keep it above. But there are discrepancies, hence why my comment in it. There are discrepancies between what was tabled in the Senate and what was given to us, and as the financial secretary said, is that...
No, please, members,
so we're just seeking more clarity.
It's just the word of the hypocrisy. It sounded political to me, which is perhaps why I responded to the chairman.
No, members, please.
My colleagues here probably to just tell him not to worry. Just that he has gotten poor advice from others coming here. That's the reason why. You should not hold it against him.
Members, I think the FS would like to make an intervention. Sorry, FS.
Okay, just pointing out that we had to ask for clarity on what was being requested because, again, as indicated, we were getting requests from several places with varying different asks. So, in terms of what went to the Senate and what went here was based on what we thought was being asked. Certainly, the one with the entity, where Mr. Seabright is actually with an entity, when we asked the ministry for their consultants and advisors, that would not have shown up because he was with their entity according to their engagements.
What you have said to us that he is down on in many correspondence as consultant advisor. I think it would be necessary for you to let the committee know within what salary band and the terms of his employment mechanism of contract, because from history has shown that they certainly for anyone going into the government service, there is a fairly rigorous mechanism. We just want to ensure that these are not being, I hesitate to use the word circumvented, but that's a mechanism. So we would give you the opportunity to go. I think that given my remarks and where we want to go, we would simply ask the clerk to formally ask you so that we can, and certainly what we would like from you, FS, is for you to also advise us on what you think are the correct mechanisms. Because our job is simply to advise Parliament and to indicate to Parliament the recommendations of the committee. So what better technical advice could we get?
Okay, sir. So I would also just like to indicate that in terms of contract officers, if you just ask for contract officers, it means you are including persons who are on contracts but in actual established posts, not necessarily persons who are advising ministers or consultants. It is just that their engagement was through a contract.
I think that may be too extensive. That may be, given the numbers. Could members, I understand the difficulty that occurs here, because it may well be that this number could go into the hundreds.
Yes.
Or thousands maybe if you just deal with straight contract. I think the spirit of what we're asking is those persons brought on sort of in a consultant / advisory post outside of the standard sector in the various agencies and departments. I don't think we're really specifically speaking about the structure itself.
Okay.
Okay?
Can
do members, I just want to know if the members agree.
Just on the latter part, the fixed term, can we just get the numbers of different ministries or agencies instead of giving the individual names? And then if we need seek any additional information for those fixed term?
Yes, but I still believe, though, that those departments and agencies, just the general advisors / consultants that are there may be useful. All right, members, I don't know, are there any other questions for the Minister of Finance? All right, well, FS, thank you and the team. It's been very helpful. I think that moving forward we can sort of get some more clarity. As I said, there's some follow-up. You can deal with it, and certainly we would like your advice on how we can strengthen the structure of what obtains.
Yes.
All right, members, members, the next week we have the Ministry of Youth, and we have the Ministry of Tourism and TF Road Program coming. So with that, if there's nothing else under matters arising, I will adjourn the committee. All right? So adjourn. Thank you.
Before we adjourn, Chairman, you can advise our colleague here from our temporary colleague from East Central St. Catherine that he must not take all advice he gets from elsewhere before coming here too serious. They'll get him in trouble.
It's only a lawyer injunction, which is only a lawyer injunction. I just.
I received advice from no one.